Welcome to Garden Preserve. I'm Carter and I am really glad to have you here today. My preservation list is getting longer every single day. So we're going to see how much progress I can make in the next day or two to get a few of these things under my belt before the produce really overwhelms me. So we're going to start today with tomato jam, which is number one on my list of things, well, one or two, maybe, we'll see, on my list of things that I am now completely out of. We have gone through this. I did it, I guess, the first time a couple of years ago. And then I didn't know what to do with it because I'm not a ketchup person, so I'm not used to using ketchup. And I thought, well, it's just a replacement for ketchup. Well, no. I figured out how I like to use it. And once I did that, we went through the entire batch of it. So it is time for some more. So I have 5 pounds of tomatoes here, which will be twice, I think, what I did last time. So I'm excited about that. We're going to get that going today. I have an entire kitchen table full of tomatoes over here. I have onions. I have overflow out on the patio. I have peppers in the fridge. I have garlic. I have all kinds of things that needs to get done this week. So we're just going to see how much progress I can make in the next day or two. I don't have a ton of time today, but I'm going to do everything I possibly can, and you're coming along with me. So I'm going to get these tomatoes chopped up. This is the same recipe that I used last time, so I will link the old video from a couple of years ago up here. Homemade tomato jam for canning is the recipe, and it actually doesn't say on here where it's from, but it does in the link that I'll put down below. All right, I'm going to get these chopped up and then we'll get moving. It comes together pretty quickly, but it does take a long time to cook before I can even process it. So while it is cooking, I have some other projects that we need to do. All right, I'm almost done with the 5 pounds of tomatoes. You're supposed to dice them up really small. Yeah, kind of manage that. I wanted to show you the 3 different tomatoes that I'm growing this year, specifically for canning. I may have a new favorite. So this is Italian Roma. This is one I've grown for years. It has great taste to it, but it is small. This is Plum Regal. Again, I think this is the 3rd year I've grown this. It is significantly larger, which makes me feel like I'm getting a whole lot more for the space in my garden. Not quite as flavorful as this one, but you know, often when you can things, you're cooking it down so much, it doesn't need to start out perfect as something you would just eat on a tomato sandwich, right? This one it's been around for a long time. The first time I've ever grown it. This is Celebrity. You know, it's a hybrid. It is a semi-determinate. It does get to be pretty tall. My plants are probably 6 feet tall. They have produced, I mean, just like crazy numbers of tomatoes. They're, you know, relatively uniform. I get some cracking, but they ripen fairly quickly. They're a good size. They're quite heavy. I'm going to open this and show you the differences in all of these tomatoes and why this is becoming my new favorite. All right, let's start with the Italian Roma. So basically your typical Roma. Not a whole lot of seeds and gel, but enough that, you know, I kind of want to cut it out. So we'll cut that one out. This is the Plum Regal. Again, there is enough of a center core and gel there that it makes me want to cut it out. All right, now let's take a look at the Celebrity. So there's some cracking. I'll need to get rid of that. This is a good looking tomato. Significantly less core and seeds and juices than I would have expected it to have. Slices up great. It's super easy. And the core, while it's big on the top, on the outside, it doesn't go all the way through the length of the tomato like these Romas do. So I think that this is going to become my new favorite. So that's a slice of tomato. I've seen a lot of folks, I want to say old-timey folks, I don't mean that in any kind of way except that they're people who've been doing this forever, and a lot of them use celebrity tomatoes for canning, and I always thought, well, that's not a paste tomato, that doesn't make any sense. Well, you know, live and learn, right? So this is one I'm going to be growing quite a bit of. Now, there is a Celebrity Plus that has come out since I bought these seeds. That's the other thing I'll tell you. These Celebrity seeds were very old. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, I bought them, and I just never used them because I thought, well, you know, it's just a boring tomato. And, you know, taste-wise, it's actually pretty good. It's a real tomato flavor. It's not, if I'm going to eat something on a tomato sandwich or just, you know, sliced up on the side of my plate, I kind of like a sweet tomato. This one is not a sweet tomato by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that the flavor is really quite good for canning. So if the flavor concentrates when you can, I'm not at all concerned about this not being a wonderful option. So I don't even know if I told you, my favorite way to use the tomato jam is as a topper for meatloaf. And I know that may sound, you know, kind of like a duh moment to many of you, but to me it didn't. I don't like ketchup, so it was never, I never put a tomato topping on my meatloaf, ever. It, you know, it wasn't on there growing up, it just, I don't know. So anyway, when I did it, I didn't really have high hopes, but oh my goodness, it was really fantastic. So that's how we've been using all of the tomato jam. And if I have any left today that doesn't fit in the canner, which I don't think I will, that's what we'll be doing, probably tomorrow for dinner. So what tomatoes do you grow for canning purposes? Strictly for canning purposes. We'll talk about slicers for, you know, your tomato sandwiches later. But for canning purposes, let me get this out of the way. Okay, that was the time-consuming part. The rest is nothing. I mean, we're just going to dump stuff in. So my recipe says 5 pounds of fresh tomatoes finely chopped, which is, this is an 8-cup thing, so maybe it is 10 cups because I went all the way to the top and even a little bit over. All right, let's see, 2 teaspoons of freshly grated ginger. It was freshly grated at one point before I stuck it in the freezer. I pulled that out to defrost earlier today. So 2 teaspoons, that may have been a little heavy, but I love ginger, so I'm okay with going heavy on that. I want to do next, let's get the spices in here. Cloves, 1/2 teaspoon ground cloves. Again, this recipe will be linked down below, as will the full video from when I did it the first time. Cinnamon, teaspoon. Tablespoon of salt. Tablespoon of red chili flakes. I wonder if I did the full tablespoon last time. I can't remember. We'll just go for it. All right, tablespoon of red chili flakes. 3½ cups of sugar. You know, I use allulose, so I'm going to use that again here, but certainly sugar is what it calls for, and use sugar if you would like. All right, 3.5, I have a 1/2 cup scape, so I'll do 7 of these, which feels like an enormous amount of sweetener, but 2, 5, 6, 7. All right. Lime juice, it's all that is left. I think I've got 1 in the fridge. Let me get that out. Eight tablespoons of bottled lime juice. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's it. So now we're going to put it on the stove, stir this up, put it on the stove, and let it cook down for quite some time. It should be kind of a thick, sticky, kind of messy proposition by the time it gets to the consistency that we want. So I'm going to stir this regularly. I'm going to try to get a couple of other things done while this is on the stove. Okay, that's how we're looking going on. All right, I'm going to get cleaned up and we're going to pull out some garlic. So my garlic this year, let's talk about the garden year so far because it's been a weird one. So this spring, probably the same for most of you, it was extraordinarily wet and kind of chilly, which I thought was delightful. But the wet part was really crazy. There were days when we had 8 inches of rain in one day. It was nuts. Every place was flooded. So things like my onions and my garlic just really didn't do very well. We also had a lot of wind. I don't think we ended up having any hail this year, although spring usually means hail for us. But it just did a number on my onions, my garlic. The garlic was just a mess. So this year, in fact last year I supplemented with the fresh peeled garlic. Fresh, I'm going to say fresh. With the peeled garlic that I get at Sam's Club or Costco or something like that. So I'm going to do that again because I keep hearing that garlic is going to be scarce this year. So I don't know whether they just mean garlic powder, which I think most of it comes from China, or whether they're talking about, fresh garlic that you can get at the grocery store. I don't know. Either way, I'm not going to be caught without garlic because I know I had a terrible year. So I imagine most garlic growers around here probably had a terrible year as well. So I'm going to try to get a bunch of that processed and ready for the freezer. I'll probably freeze dry some as well, turn that into garlic powder. So let me get cleaned up and then we'll move on to that. Okay, we have garlic, lots and lots of garlic. I got 2 bags of this stuff. It's already peeled. It's not rotten like what I pulled out of the ground. So I'm going to get this turned up in the food processor. And then I have these little ice cube like trays with the squishy back so I can get them out easily. It's actually like 4 teaspoons worth of volume in there, but since I like garlic, we're just going to call it a tablespoon's worth, which would be 3 teaspoons. And then I can freeze these and then move them into a bag and use them just straight out of the freezer. And then for the second bag, I don't know exactly how this is going to divide out, but pretty much for the second bag, I want to go ahead and chop it up and freeze dry it so that I can turn that into garlic powder. This smells so good back here. I can't even tell you, it just smells fantastic. Has a long way to go though. In my original recipe here, it says it could take an hour to an hour and a half to kind of cook down. I don't think it took that long the first time I did this recipe, but we'll see. I need to go back and watch that video again. But anyway, that's cooking along, so let's get this going. I've done a few other things in the past week. Well, I kind of do them all the time, right? So I've done a lot of freeze-dried of herbs this year. So I've done more dill. I had more dill this year than I think I've ever had in my entire life. It was crazy amount of dill. So I probably have done 2 quarts full of dried dill. I mean, that's a lot. That could take me 30 years to use that much dill. Anyway, so I was really pleased to have that because I was completely out. I've done a bunch of oregano. I've done probably a gallon, believe it or not, a gallon of basil. I have also done about a gallon of cilantro. I don't know if you remember, but over the winter, I had done what I was calling like a living, or a, what was I calling it? An edible ground cover. So I threw out herbs and greens and all kinds of things. And I had spinach and kale and lettuce and cilantro and parsley and arugula, mustard. I had all kinds of stuff. Well, I grew so much cilantro over the winter. And when everything else died in the snow and the crazy low temperatures, the only things that survived were the cilantro and the spinach. And the cilantro just never skipped a beat. It just pretty much kept going. And so I was harvesting that every 2 weeks or so and freeze drying it. And I have a ton of cilantro. So I'm really excited about that. I'm definitely going to do that again this year. In fact, David and I were talking about it last night, and he's like, well, make sure we have plenty of lettuce. so I'll get plenty of lettuce in there. But the arugula did great. The spinach did great. The cilantro was great. Parsley, you know, sometimes my parsley survives a big heavy snow and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to try to get it in a little bit sooner this year so it has more time to get established, get a little bit bigger. But I'm going to do that. Swiss chard did great. That, in fact, I still have Swiss chard and I still have kale out there now. They haven't bolted, haven't done anything. They're just great, and we're still eating off of them from, my goodness, last November. Yeah, I think last November when I threw it in as ground cover. So anyway, that worked extraordinarily well for me. It did a great job for my beds. When everything died in the snow, it just kind of worked its way into the soil, turned it up just a little bit, and really added some, I think, some good life and some good viability to the soil. So I'm doing that again. Now, so here's the question with this. See how it has the little tip, the little root end on here. If I were just doing this for dinner, you know, a few of these for dinner, I would probably cut that off. It's not terribly hard. I think I'm just going to throw it in. I know a lot of you would think, well, of course you just throw it in, Carter, but I don't know. I get a little weird about stuff like that. I'm going to do the best I can. See if there's anything really big and hard. I'll cut that off. I'll cut that one. And I'll cut that one. I'll definitely cut that one. I don't know. I might regret leaving this on. Oh yeah. No, I don't put any kind of oil or anything in mine. You certainly could, but this way, oh, it smells amazing. This way I know it's just plain garlic to put into whatever recipe I need it for. Okay, all 3 trays are filled. So those will go straight in the garage freezer. And then when they're done, I'll just pop them out into a baggie and leave them in this freezer. But what I want to do now, so this is the last of the first bag. So I'm going to have a lot of garlic, which is great. Try to get these on freeze dryer trays. So I'm going to go ahead and get these into the freezer, let them freeze overnight. And I'm going to come up with a couple of other things probably to go on the other freeze dryer trays that can go in with a batch of garlic. So while I don't have any smell in the freeze dryer room from the garlic will certainly permeate whatever else is in there in the freeze dryer at the same time. So yeah, I'll do some onions or something. So last year, I guess that was the first time I'd put the garlic in the freeze dryer. I just put the whole cloves. I cut off the little end and put the whole cloves on the tray and stuck them in the freeze dryer. Whoa, don't ever do that. It took forever. And I had to pull them out of the freeze dryer and cut them in half because there wasn't enough room for the moisture to escape. And I had to do them over and over again. That was crazy. So from now on, I'll just grind it up tiny and then stick it in the freeze dryer. My thought was that it would hold better, keep longer, in whole cloves, which is probably accurate. However, it didn't end up being whole cloves anyway because I had to chop them up so much to give them enough surface area to get the water out. Okay. All right, along those same lines, I'm going to put some crevices in here because it does make it easier for the freeze dryer to pull out the moisture. Another thing I've done quite a bit of so far this summer is dehydrating cherry tomatoes, and that's one of my favorite things to have on the shelf. I haven't gotten nearly as many as I would like this year because my indeterminate plants, the cherry tomatoes that I do all the time that I just absolutely love, are not really producing very well because it turns out trees grow. And so the trees have kind of encroached on my, overhead space, whatever, from my garden. And so I'm not getting nearly the sun in that particular area as I was before. It's always been a great spot to grow the cherry tomatoes. But I don't know how that's going to work out at all. I have another archway in my garden as well, and that one still gets tons of sun. It's right at the end, so I put my loofah there. First year I was growing loofah, I thought, oh, this is going to be so much fun. It was going gangbusters, and then I went out there one morning and it had been just shredded, pulled out of the ground, pulled from up above on the arch, and just shredded all over the ground. So at best I could tell, it was something like a deer. Could have been something with hands, could have been a raccoon. I don't know what in the world. I didn't have any loofahs on there at the time, but it was kind of too late to start another one. So I toyed with doing another round of tomatoes over there. Those cherry tomatoes I like so much, which are sun peach and sun sugar. you know, just taking a sucker from one of those. But I already have, because of all the moisture this year, I have so much disease out there in my tomatoes that I thought, well, you know, I'm just starting one off with more disease. So I'm going to get what I'm going to get this year in terms of cherry tomatoes this year. And that's just going to have to be good enough. I do have a bunch of little patio tomatoes, and they, you know, they produced a whole lot at the very beginning, but they're done. They're spent now at this point, so we'll see. I think I'll end up fine. I still have some cherry tomatoes left from last year that are dehydrated. All right, I'm gonna get all of this in the freezer and get cleaned up, and then we'll take a look at the tomato jam. All right, let's see how the tomato jam is looking. I don't know if you can, oh, that's hot, hang on. It's down by maybe a third. It's looking good, darkening up, starting to be the color of ketchup. Remember how light the tomatoes were? This is looking awesome. So down by at least a third, maybe 40%, pushing 50. So we're gonna let that keep going. It's been an hour and a half. So there you go, it's taken longer than the directions suggested it would. All right, I watched my old video back, and I'm really glad I did. Learned a couple of things, shocking. The first is that last time I did this, I only did a half batch. I only had 2.5 pounds of tomatoes. So it went a little faster in terms of cooking down. I think it was about an hour that it took me. And I also had a wider pan. So it's going to take longer because I have a skinnier, narrower, I don't know what you call it, pan. It doesn't have as much surface area on the bottom. And I did a full recipe this time. So I did the full 5 pounds of tomatoes. The other thing I noticed when I was looking at the video is that the recipe used to call for light brown sugar. Now it just calls for sugar. So I looked up the original directions, and it was actually updated in 2024 at some point. And I assume that's when she changed it from light brown sugar to regular sugar for some reason. I don't know what the answer is, but I really like the flavor of it last time, and I love molasses. So I'm going to add a little bit of molasses to effectively make the sugar allulose that I put in brown sugar. And then the other thing that I learned from the video is that the final product had reduced by about 3/4 from where I started. So that at least gives me something to aim for. I'm probably halfway down now, still a little liquidy. I'm going to add a little bit of molasses, stir it up a little bit, and then I've got some other things I have to go do. So I'm going to turn it down to low and just let it go until it's done. Okay, I've added a little bit of molasses, and I think I'm really going to like that. I was looking through her comments, and there were several people who said that they thought the recipe was too sweet for them. So it may be that because of that, that's the reason she got rid of the, you know, molasses kind of adds that extra level depth of sweetness. So maybe she did that, but I used allulose, which is 70% as sweet as sugar. So to me, this is not too sweet at all. And I'm not really big on super sweet things. The other thing I wanted to say is that she did say that she had several questions about why don't you peel the tomatoes, and she said she thought, you know, as you normally do when you're canning tomatoes, that you peel them. And she tried that one time, and she said it just completely fell apart. There was no texture to it. It was terrible. So now she does it with the peels on. It adds great texture, thickness, beautiful color. And I agree. I mean, it's great. It was fantastic last time. I don't think I'm going to have any issues. And I did not blend it last time. It's just going to continue breaking down, and we'll get to that fantastic texture. All right, we'll be back when this is ready to can. This is looking fantastic. It's been about 3 hours total. The last hour or so, it was really on a very low heat because I was occupied with something else. Okay, this is how it looks now. It is really rich, and in fact, that's the word I was looking for when we were talking about the molasses. It just adds a depth of richness to it, but this looks fantastic. So I have my jars heated up, and we're going to get to putting this in the jars. Okay, I do this in 1/4 pint jars because we're just a family of 2, and that's really all I need to top a meatloaf with. But if you have a larger family, or this is something you would use, you know, as a serving condiment all the time kind of thing, then feel free to use 1/2 pint jars. That's how she did it in the recipe. The taste on this thing is fantastic. It does mellow over time. It's a little bit zippy with the hot peppers, but as I mentioned in my video, that really does mellow over time. Okay, let's get this in. This is a 1/4 inch headspace. You know, thick tomato products I think tend to siphon a bit, so I'm going to go for between 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. Now, this is one of those recipes that kind of really comes together over time as the flavors meld. So I figure maybe 6 weeks or so. That's a little full there. 6 or 8 weeks maybe sitting on the shelf, and all those flavors will have come together. The heat will mellow out a little bit. Certainly feel free to use less of the hot pepper flakes if you'd like. Okay, let's debubble these. Actually see this up close. I don't know that the color really comes across on the screen, on the camera, but it's just beautiful. Remember, it's going to be really sticky, particularly if you use real sugar. I'm going to use a steam canner today because that is by far my favorite way to effectively water bath. These are going to process for 20 minutes. I think I'm only going to have maybe 3 jars. All right, well, I have extra tomatoes at the end. I bet I'll be making another batch of this later in the season. So I ended up with only 8 1/4 pint jars. I think it does say 4 or 5 1/2 pint jars, so 8 is, you know, probably what I should have expected. All right, I'm going to wait for this to get up to the mark that I need for my altitude, and then it's going to go for 20 minutes. And then when the timer goes off, I'll turn off the burner, leave the lid on, let it sit for 5 more minutes, and then at the end of 5 minutes, we'll take it out. So I know that you've been watching, as I have, all the YouTubers pull these big, beautiful, just stunning looking onions out of their gardens this year. Well, that is not the way it happened here. This is what I pulled out of my garden. They are pathetic. They are tiny. I don't know, they're ridiculous. I planted way more than this. I mean, literally way more than this. I think I did I don't know, 100 of each of 2 different varieties, so maybe 200 onions. And this is what I got. So our spring, I know, all kinds of excuses, right? Our spring was terrible. It was cold. It was incredibly rainy. It was incredibly windy, and the onions were knocked over pretty much right off the bat. And they just, I don't know. That and the fact that my trees, they leafed out again, bigger and bigger. They keep covering up my garden. And one of these days, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and get the tree chopped down when my husband's not home or something. But anyway, I'm having kind of an issue with finding some sun in my backyard. But anyway, I grew a lousy batch of onions, but I grew enough to do at least 1 batch. I don't know if I grew enough to do 2 batches, but I grew enough to do at least 1 batch of maple onion jam. So we're going to do that today and be grateful for it. And then after that, if I need another batch, I'll just, have to rely on Costco to get me some great onions. All right, I'm going to clean these up, try to run them through here. I'm not going to do that on camera because I'll just boo-hoo all over the place. Be right back with you. All right, 5 pounds of onions trimmed and washed. I don't know which was worse, crying through all of that or realizing that after planting 200 onion starts and cleaning up 5 pounds of them, this is what I have left. I may have to cry over that too. Anyway, maybe I don't do onions next year. But I do have enough to do 1 batch of maple onion jam today. So let's get started with that. Okay, so that put me out of my misery much faster than slicing them by hand. But my goodness, I've just been here boo-hooing, waiting to turn on the camera. So 5 pounds of onions. I hope you can see that. There's kind of a glare. Anyway, 5 pounds of onions, and that's just going to cook down to be, unfortunately, virtually nothing. But that's where we're going. So I'm going to link the original video that I did back in, I think it was 2023. I have the recipes there and the sources for all the recipes. So let's get everything added here. I need a teaspoon and a half of salt, 2/3 of a cup of both apple cider vinegar and balsamic vinegar. Not much left there. So I use this maple onion jam on pretty much everything. I use it on pizza. It's incredible on pizza. I use it on burgers with my meatloaf. I think I mentioned that. Put it on cheese and crackers. Oh, grilled cheese sandwich. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic on that. Or a ham and grilled cheese sandwich. Can't get this open. So we literally use it on everything, and it truly is probably my favorite condiment I've made in years. So I'm glad to get this done. I wish I'd had enough onions to do a second batch while I was torturing myself with slicing the onions, but I didn't. So this is going to take an hour and a half or so to cook down. I'm just going to keep stirring it, keep an eye on it. I'll add the rest of the things, which will be 1 cup of brown sugar. I'm going to use allulose and molasses, just like I did yesterday with the tomato jam. And 4 tablespoons of maple syrup. And I put this in 4-ounce jars. So for me, it's going to make, in theory, 12 to 14 4-ounce jars. I'm always shocked how much onions cook down. So we'll come back and check on these in a little while when I can get the sugar and maple syrup in. Meanwhile, I have a big mess to clean up and a dishwasher to empty. All right, this is looking and smelling fantastic. So it's been about an hour and 15 minutes, probably a little longer because I went ahead and put the vinegar in rather than sweating out the onions first. But it's worked just fine. Looks terrific. I'm going to go ahead and get the sweeteners in. I can not make a mess here. And then we'll let it continue to cook down by half again. All right, I need four tablespoons of maple syrup. 1, 2, 3, 4. May have gone a little bit over, didn't mean to. All right, and I'm going to do 1 cup of brown sugar. So I'm going to use molasses here, and I'm using allulose, but feel free to use sugar, of course, or brown sugar. Okay. All right, I have a 1/2 cup measure. I'll do 2 of these. Remember, allulose is only 70% as sweet as sugar. So if you're using allulose, I'm going to taste it and make sure that it is as sweet as you would like it to be. To me, onions are so sweet, it just doesn't need too much sweetener. All right, we're going to let this cook down by half again, and then we'll get it jarred up. All right, so we want to get to the point with this where you can move it and the liquid stays moved. So we are almost there, as you can see. So we'll give that just a second while I get out the jars. They have been in the steam canner. I'm going to do this in the steam canner today. And let me tell you what we're doing here. I'm using the 4-ounce jars, 1/4-inch headspace, and they go in the canner for 10 minutes. And then with the steam canner, I'll turn the heat off after that and let it sit for another 5 minutes before I remove the lid. I think we're there. All right, let me get the jars out. I have 12 jars in the steam canner, which is what will fit. If I have extra, I will be very happy, and I will do a second load. That turned off. Stir it one more time. I think we should taste it again. It's extremely good. Debubbling is going to be important. Make sure that these onions get all the way down into the jar, because there's not a great deal of liquid in this. All right, and then those rims are likely to be sticky, so let's do a good job wiping them off. All right. Some new lids. All right, I don't know if I have 6 more jars worth in there, but I sure hope I do. All right, just got my 12 jars. Last time I made this, the second batch I made with jalapenos in it. And it was good, it was tasty, but I will say that the jalapenos mellowed so much with time that you really couldn't even tell they were there after a bit. Okay, so on the steam canner, if we're almost there, I'll give this just a second to get up to where it needs to be for my altitude, and then I'll set the timer for 10 minutes. My whole kitchen smells so good. If you haven't made this one yet, you really ought to give it a shot. It just doesn't get any better in my opinion. Okay, wasn't a bad week. We got a lot done. So quickly, got a whole bunch of frozen garlic ready to be used straight in recipes. I got a bunch freeze-dried. We took care of several of our cherry tomatoes. This is like a constant thing throughout the summer for me, plus all of the herbs. We did basil and sage, oregano, and thyme this week. Although I didn't film most of it, I did start this week by doing a ton of the fruit sauces that I have made for you many times before, which is why I didn't film most of it. But I did blueberry, I did raspberry, and I did a strawberry cherry version. So I now have 30 jars of that to put on the shelf, which is about a 5-month supply for us. So it's something I have to do several times throughout the year, but I'm really glad to get that done. We also got a dozen jars of onion jam. I'm so excited to have that one back on the shelf. And then I got 8 jars of tomato jam. And yeah, I may be doing another batch of that before the end of the season. So I am so excited with this, and I look forward to next week. I have, my goodness, I have a long list of priorities for this year. So there's a lot left to be done, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much for being with me today. Bye-bye.